What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my latest video. This is part of a series where I'm focusing on my top 100 favorite films of all time. This is part 4. Now do keep in mind, part 1 was my number 1 to 25, part 2 was my number 26 to 50, and then part 3 was my number 51 to 75, and part 4 was my number 76 to 100, aka this video that you clicked on. Now, in terms of this video, I will be going from 100 to 76, and I am very curious to hear your guys' either top 5, top 50, top 75, or top 100, whatever the case may be. I want to hear your guys' lists down below, because the great thing is about film is that it is subjective, so your list is going to be different from mine, and that's what I love about it. But again, I want to hear your guys' lists down below. But guys, enough exposition. Let's get started. So kicking things off, we have my number 100. This is the newest entry on this list, and that is Decision to Leave. I know some people thought this was just okay, but honestly, I absolutely loved Park Chan-wook's film. I think that it is a great combination of many different genres. It is, yes, in some ways an update on Vertigo, and truth be told, Vertigo almost made my list, but Decision to Leave, I just think is such a breath of fresh air, and it was my favorite film of 2022. I absolutely loved the combination of mystery, romance, thriller. It does everything right. It has an ending that is both sad, but also very much so satisfying and warranted given the characters and everything that they went through prior to that ending. But what a film, what a film. If you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend you watch it. I do know that it is on Mubi, but you can also pick it up on physical media. The Blu-ray, it does look really, really good. And yeah, my number 100. Next up, my number 99. I don't own it yet on physical media, but to be fair, I did watch it for the first time this year, and yeah, my number 99 is The Conformist. So The Conformist, I had heard about it for many, many years, and it was actually in a book that I got at Disney World like over a decade ago, in top 101 movies of all time, and I finally saw it because of that, because I wanted to finalize that list and watch all of those movies, which I finally did this year. And watching The Conformist, I have to say, what a film. That was a great film. I absolutely adored it. And I do hope that it gets a 4K release. There's rumors that it will be getting a Criterion release. I hope that's the case, because it looks good in terms of the streaming service that I watched it on, but I know it could look better. And just in general, it's a really very well-acted film. It's got very interesting themes and messages, and the ending is really, really something. Which, if you're new to the channel, endings really, really are important for me. I think it can sometimes make or break a film. And in the terms of The Conformist, the ending really hits home. I think it's an excellent film, and if you've been sleeping on it, would highly recommend you check out The Conformist. And yeah, that's why it's my number 99. Next up, my number 98. I always mispronounce the title sometimes. Well, not always, sometimes. But my number 8 is The Bridge on the River Kwai. This is a great film. I saw it for the first time like a decade ago, and I thought it was good, but I thought it was overlong. And then I decided to pick it up on 4K when I saw that it was getting released on Steelbook. And just watching it a second time really made me appreciate it much more. I think that the last 10 minutes in particular are incredible, but the build up to the final 10 minutes are really something. And I also love the moral dilemmas that the characters are put into, and you see the different perspectives, and you understand with where they're coming from. It's epic, it's gorgeous, it sounds great, the sound design is outstanding, but also that score, perfection. This movie gets everything right. I absolutely love it. I almost had Lawrence Arabia on this list, I did, but Lawrence Arabia I do think is a little bit too long, and that movie, as of right now, it's like just outside my top 100. But this, which is the same director, I have a little bit higher, because I do love this film a little bit more, which I know might be a hot take, but there you go. But yeah, that's my number 98. Next up, my number 97, one of my favorite comedies, we have Some Like It Hot. Some Like It Hot is just, it's a joy. It's a joy of a film. Marilyn Monroe does such a great job. Tony Curtis. I just think that it's not only a well-acted film, but it also has so much humor that, given the fact that it was still made during the Hays Code, is really quite something that is able to get away with all these like sly innuendos that probably wouldn't be as sly today, because they would be like, well, we don't have to be sly, but because, again, the Hays Code, they had to be. And it's really quite effective with what they're doing, and I think it's so funny. Like the Jello on Springs, certain lines like that are just really something where it's like, oh, I see what you did there, I like that. But it's also a very groundbreaking film in terms of the themes and messages that it's tackling, and so much so that there are many films that have taken inspiration from this film, and for good reasons. It's a very well-written, well-acted film with a hilarious ending that hits home everything that was coming before it. Some Like It Hot, if you've been sleeping on it, one of the best films of the 1950s, and just a personal favorite of mine. And Yep, that's why it is my number 97. Next up, my number 96. It is a film that I can't tell you the first time I saw it because it's been one of those films that's been ingrained in my life since I was a kid. And my number 96 is It's a Wonderful Life. Yeah, it's a wonderful film. I think what's really impressive about this film is that you can watch it as a kid, you can watch it as a teenager, and you can watch it as an adult, and all aspects of life, you'll still respect and appreciate the heck out of this film. And that's something that you can't really say a lot for many films. A lot of times, there'll be films that you either liked as a kid and you grew up and you don't like, or you'll have it where it's the other way around, where you weren't really a big fan of a movie as a kid, and then as you grew up, you adored the film. Like for me, that was the case with 2001: A Space Odyssey. I wasn't a big fan of it when I saw it as a teenager, but then as an adult, I absolutely love the film. It's one of my favorite films of all time. But It's a Wonderful Life, it's endured through all aspects of my life. It's one of those films that I come back to every year, or try to at least, watch it around Christmas time. And I just find myself getting quite emotional with this film. It's very, very impactful. It does such a great job of just really hitting home the themes and messages, and it's got such an emotional ending. James Stewart's incredible. It gets everything right, man. It gets everything right. If you've been sleeping on this film, watch it ASAP. It's a classic for a reason, and yeah, that's why it's my number 96. Next up, my number 95, we have another comedy. We have The Big Lebowski. So here we go, talking about a film that my view changed quite a bit over the course of time. When I first saw The Big Lebowski, I thought it was good, but I did think it was a tad overrated. But I just kept coming back to it. I kept coming back to it, and the more I watched it, the more I loved it. And now I think that not only is it one of the best comedies of all time, I think that it is one of the best Coen Brother films of all time. And additionally, what's also impressive about this film is how it is able to be a stoner film, it's able to be a comedy film, it's able to be a zany adventure film, all in one film. It's impressive, honestly. And what's more importantly is that a lot of times comedies aren't really that well shot. This film is exceptionally well shot. Roger Deakins' cinematography is off the charts. It's got a great score, catchy soundtrack, incredible dialogue, the performances, the effortless chemistry between all of these cast members. It's just a film that gets everything right. Like, I love this film. I really do. And yeah, I'm glad that I've come back to it many times over the course of my life, because if you told Chad a decade ago that this would be in my top 100, I would say, hey, yeah, right. But here we are. I love it. I just keep coming back to it, and I think it's a great film, and yeah, that's why it's my number 95. Next up, my number 94, we have another film where, similar to The Big Lebowski, thought it was good, and if you told me a decade ago that it would be on my list now, I'd say, yeah, okay, sure. But my number 94 is Night of the Living Dead. So I say all of what I just said because Night of the Living Dead, when I saw it, I think it was January of 2015, I liked it enough, but I also watched Dawn of the Dead like the next day, or it might have been the same day, but either way, Dawn of the Dead, I was like, this is a much better film. Dawn of the Dead's much, much better. And I watched it a couple more times, and Night of the Living Dead was one of those films that I probably wouldn't have seen again if it wasn't for having to watch it then in a film class. And I then came back to it several years later, and I liked it even more. And then I watched it again and again, and now I absolutely love the film. I think I like it more than Dawn of the Dead now. I think it's safe to say. I do like Dawn of the Dead quite a bit, but Night of the Living Dead, I just think that there's a lot more social commentary in it that I think is enriching the experience of what these characters are going through. And I also really do think, and I mean this, I think the black and white cinematography adds a lot to the atmosphere of all that's going on. The makeup, I think, is top notch. I also think that in terms of with what it was doing for its time, I think was also quite something. And the ending, I don't know why the ending didn't hit home like almost a decade ago, but now watching that ending, it's really something, man. I love Night of the Living Dead. I really do. I own it on Blu-ray Criterion, and I do think it looks outstanding. I do see that there is a Criterion 4K for it, but I haven't upgraded it because, you know, it's a 4K restoration like for this. So I'm just like, for this movie, like this Blu-ray. So I'm like, I don't really see the point of it as of right now, as of filming this video. But again, either way, pick it up on Blu-ray, pick it up on 4K. Either way, I think as a film fan, I think you will be happy because this film did a lot for the genre of horror. And yeah, I absolutely love Night of the Living Dead, and that's why it's my number 94. And next up, we have my number 93, which is The Green Mile. So The Green Mile, it is a prison film, it's a drama, it's a fantasy film, blends all these genres seamlessly together. But what I also really appreciate about this film is that It is one of the best casted films of all time. Every single cast member gives their all. They pull their weight to the extent of where you can't help but get caught up with these characters and all the drama that they are going through. It's a very emotional film, but at the same time, it does have a bittersweet ending that is quite effective. But just in general, the third act of this film, I find myself tearing up every single time watching it. It's again a very emotional journey with what you're going through, and I also really appreciate how this film takes place mostly in a prison, but you feel alive with these characters. You don't feel constrained. You feel alive with these characters because, again, you care about these characters. It is one of the best 3-hour films I've ever seen, too, because, yeah, it is deliberately paced, but again, because you have that time with these characters, you really get to know and feel as if you are with them. And that, I think, is what really makes this film work. And it's also incredible in terms of the filmmaking. It's got really, really good filmmaking that holds up 20 plus years later. And yeah, if you've been sleeping on the Green Mile, would highly recommend it. But do go into it knowing that it is an emotional experience. And yeah, that's why it's my number 93. Next up, my number 92, we have Taxi Driver. So I didn't always like Taxi Driver. In fact, when I first saw it, I was kind of disappointed by it. But it's a film that I've come back to more and more over the course of the last 10 years. And rewatching it multiple times, I've grown to really appreciate it and like it. I like quite a bit the cinematography and the score in particular and how dreamlike it is. So it really does have it where you have dreamlike qualities such as the cinematography and the score, but then you also have a production design that's very, gritty in terms of really trying to give that aesthetic of New York during this time period. So where it's like you understand why this character is the way he is and all that's surrounding him, the seedy nature of it all. So it really helps blends the question of, hey, what is real and what's not real? And I think that this is one of those films that definitely is one of the better examples of a unreliable narrator, which I love. I love this type of films, and Taxi Driver definitely is one of the best of those. But I'll also say this, as much as I do like Joker of 2019, I think it's a solid film. I think that Taxi Driver, like Joker coming out, it made me rewatch Taxi Driver, and I grew even more appreciation for Taxi Driver because I was able to see how much better Taxi Driver was. Again, not comparing apples to oranges, but just Taxi Driver is such an incredible film that rewatching it, especially under a different lens, it's like, oh wow, yeah, that's a great film. I love this film. I think it's great. I do think that it's misinterpreted a lot of times. I think some people do at times really look at the main character and say, yeah, he's a good role model. It's like, it's a character study on mental illness, but you do you, man. But either way, I love Taxi Driver, and that's why it's my number 92. Next up, my number 91, we have another unreliable narrator film. We have The Machinist. So The Machinist is a film that, I'm not going to lie, like almost a decade ago, I tried to watch this film, and I think I got like 40 minutes into it before falling asleep. But last year, I decided that I was actually going to watch it fully from the beginning, and I loved it. I really did love it, and so much so that I decided to buy it on Blu-ray. And when I watched it again, second time, it hit even harder, and I was like, yeah, I love this film. It has everything that I could possibly love in a film in this. It's got a great lead performance. You have Christian Bale, who lost so much weight for this film. It's got a color palette that really, really is unique looking. I mean, it looks very, very raw. It looks very scaled down, similar to the character, honestly. In fact, I would even argue that the color grading is made to emulate the look of Christian Bale's makeup and his transformation in terms of his acting. But it's really well done. I love the score. It's very eerie. And the twist ending, I think, is so effective. It really brings home the themes and messages that have been sprinkled throughout the film. If you like mind benders, if you like unreliable narrator films, if you like character studies, this is the film for you. Might not be for everyone, but again, if you like all those elements that I just mentioned, I think you'll like The Machinist, because I know I absolutely loved it, and it does soar on Blu-ray. Who knows, maybe we'll get a 4K at some point, but I doubt it. And yeah, Machinist is my number 91. Next up, my number 90, we have The Wailing. So yeah, The Wailing, I think, is an excellent film. It is one of my favorite horror films in general, but it's also such a great film that tackles religion, ideology, and really puts these characters through the hoops in terms of their beliefs and asks a lot of moral questions. There's a lot of scenes in this film that I will never forget that are seared in my mind in terms of the imagery that we see. But it's also a film that has such a great atmosphere. It's very suspenseful. Yeah, it's over 2.5 hours long. That might make some viewers balk, as well as the fact that you do have to look at subtitles. I would not recommend, watching it dubbed. Don't do that. Don't do that. Watch it the way it's supposed to. But I would still recommend this film highly to anyone, especially if you like horror films. I would highly recommend The Wailing. It is an excellent film. I love it. It's creepy, very creepy, and it's got an ending that just is. It's really something. I think it's one of the best directed films of the 2010s, and yeah, that is why The Wailing is my number 90. Next up, my number 89, we have Y Tu Mama Tambien. So this film, ironically enough, I think when I did my Alfonso Cuarón ranking list, I think it was my number 3, and I had Gravity over it. But upon rewatching Y Tu Mama Tambien, I would have it now as my number 2 in terms of that ranking, because Y Tu Mama Tambien, I think every time I've seen it, which I think is 3 times at this point, or no, 4, it might be 4 times, but anyways, either way, this is a film that I think does such a great job of combining like coming of age, drama, LGBTQ plus. It does all these elements seamlessly, and you really do care about these characters because the dialogue feels so effortless. The acting is effortless. The cinematography, which emphasizes so many different long takes and just natural lighting and honestly incredible color usage, it just works so much. It's a road trip film. Also, I forgot to mention that, but it works so well. And also, the narration, usually in films, narration doesn't quite work for me, but Y Tu Mama Tambien has excellent narration, especially the last scene. There's a simple line of dialogue. I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a simple line of dialogue at the very last scene, and it really, really is like a gut punch. And I gotta say, I think the ending would have worked without it, but I think that last line of narration is the cherry on top to really add to a masterpiece. Y Tu Mama Tambien, if you've been sleeping on it, would highly recommend it. It is an excellent film with excellent performances, and yeah, I love it. That's why it's my number 89. Next up, my number 88, we have Lost in Translation. So you can probably guess when I'm filming this video, which is August of 2023, because I own the Blu-ray. It was recently announced that it is coming out in 4K later on this year, and you best believe I will be picking up on 4K because, yeah, Lost in Translation does look good on Blu-ray, but on 4K, I know it's going to soar even more. I think that Lost in Translation is an excellent example of a romance, drama, coming-of-age film that really works on all levels. It's very philosophical, too, which I really appreciated, and I absolutely love how the setting... This is another example of a setting that the cinematographer really emulates to make it look like and feel like a living, breathing character. That's something that you just can't buy, and I absolutely love Sofia Coppola's directing with it. You feel the melancholy of these characters. You feel the loneliness. You feel the depressed nature with what they're going through, trying to open up, trying to figure things out. You feel for these characters, and I absolutely love it. I think it is one of the best slice of life films, too, because yes, you could argue that there is some plotting, but this is definitely more character driven and more atmosphere based. And I do think that it excels at both. And the ending, excellent. We'll never know what she actually says, or what he says, I should say. But let me tell you, I love that ending every time. And also, I'm usually someone that prefers film scores over soundtracks, but man, the soundtrack in this film, it is incredible. And yeah, that's why it's my number 88. And next up, we have another Alfonso Cuarón film. You probably guessed it already, but my number 87 is Children of Men. Children of Men is a film that, like the best of films that I've mentioned already, combines genres effortlessly. We have a sci-fi film. We have an action film. We have a drama. We have so many other different elements of genres that blend together seamlessly, and it works on all different levels. There are so many different aspects of this film that I love, but you probably guessed already, but the cinematography might be my favorite aspect. I loved how this film has so many different long takes that really make it so that way you get caught up in the action of these characters and with what they're going through, especially the war scene at the end. Like, holy cow. This film also has quite an effective third act in that not only the war scene with how effective that aspect is, but there's an element after that again, I don't want to spoil, but it is just so good. You can't get caught up. You can't help but get caught up in the emotions of it. It is just that great. I think it's very well acted. Clive Owen did a great job in the lead role. Supporting characters also were good, Juliana Moore and Michael Caine, but this is definitely Clive Owen's movie, and he really excels at this. I would personally say to watch this, especially if you like Logan, because I feel like Logan was heavily inspired by Children of Men, And yeah, I love Children of Men. I do hope it gets a 4K release at some point, but the Blu-ray, it does look good. And yeah, that's why it's my number 87. Next up, my number 86, we have Brokeback Mountain. So Brokeback Mountain was a film that I've always liked. I thought it was quite good when I first saw it nearly a decade ago, but it's a film I've come back to more and more, and just every time I watch it, it's more gut-wrenching than it was the previous time. It is a love story. It's a Western. It is also a film that, because it takes place in the time period that it does, it really does a great job of showcasing how some things have changed, some things haven't, and how there is a yearning for us as audience members, because we really get to know and love these characters. Just the bottom line. Because of the acting, because of the writing, because of the character development, we care about these characters. So we wish that with what happened at Brokeback Mountain, that was something that could be a reality outside of them being on Brokeback Mountain. But because of the time period, it wasn't. And I think that that's something that's both sad, but it's also something that makes for effective drama. And that is why it was one of my favorite films of 2005. And it is a shame, it really is, that this didn't win Best Picture and that Crash did. But I am glad that it is a classic at this point, like a modern day classic, and that people do come back to it, because for good reasons. It's not an easy watch necessarily, but it is a watch that when you finish it, you can't help but just enjoy how much of a stick to your rib experience this is. Like, you can watch it just once for sure. You'll never forget about it, because it is that great of a film. You have Heath Ledger, you have Jake Gyllenhaal giving incredible performances. Heath Ledger in particular, what a performance. I would highly recommend Brokeback Mountain. I really would. I think it's a masterpiece. And yeah, it's an excellent, excellent film. Also, worth noting, but the actual Brokeback Mountain also feels like a living, breathing character, which is something I also really appreciate in my films. And Brokeback Mountain gives me that. And yeah, that's why it's my number 86. Next up, my number 85, we have Magnolia. So Magnolia is an ensemble cast-based film, and I love it. I think that Magnolia is really, really good. Paul Thomas Anderson's directing here is just top tier. Very fast-paced film. It is 3 hours and 8 minutes, which actually ironically is the same length as The Green Mile, and also came out the same year as The Green Mile. And both are films that are over 3 hours that I think just do a great job in terms of really building interest in different ways. Magnolia, I think what excels at is that it is fast-paced, but you always are watching these characters and you care about them to some extent. Some characters maybe more so than others. Like, don't get me wrong, in terms of the characters, I would say John C. Reilly's character I cared about the most. Tom Cruise's character, you don't really like his character per se, but by the end you understand with where he's coming from and how much trauma that he went through as a kid. And then William H. Macy's character I also think is really good, Juliana Moore. It's got a great cast. Everyone, again, pulls their weight, and I love every single performance. And also, there's an event that happens in the third act that I will say will make or break the film for you, but I will also say this. It's an event that has been foreshadowed throughout the entire film. Literally, the first 10 minutes beautifully sets it up. But yeah, I think this is a great film. And also a great companion piece with Boogie Nights, which, yes, I do have Boogie Nights in my top 100. And it is just a lot higher up. But I do love Magnolia, and yeah, that's why it's my number 85. Next up, my number 84, we have The Last Temptation of Christ. I love The Last Temptation of Christ. I really do. I think that it is a battle between this and Raging Bull in terms of my favorite Scorsese film. Or The Departed too, I might add. It's tough, man. It really is. But I absolutely love Paul Schrader's writing in this film. I think he does such a great job of really, really getting it so that way we as audience members try to understand Jesus in terms of with what this film's depicting. And I think it does a great job. You really feel the conflict with what he's going through. You really feel as though you're with this character and the disciples and everything with what they're going through. And I think they also do a great job of the length of this film, because when you watch the film, you're like, wait a minute, there's 45 minutes left, but he's about to get crucified. Wait, what? But the last 45 minutes, I think, is what really, really hits home everything that happened before. And I think that the final 45 minutes, you might think is meandering at first, but when you face the last couple minutes and you see why you experienced it prior, in terms of the third act, it will make sense. And it really does recontextualize things in a way that I think is very effective. I think it is a great film. It's very philosophical, thought-provoking. It's everything I want in a film. And I think that it is one of the best of the 80s. And it's a shame it only got one, Oscar nomination, I should say, at the time, which was Best Director. But man, it's a film that if you've been sleeping on, I would highly recommend it. You don't have to be religious to appreciate the film. It is just a great film in general. And yeah, that's why it's my number 84. Next up, my number 83, we have The Handmaiden. So The Handmaiden is one of those films that I've seen many times, and it's also ironically one of those films that every single time I've seen it, I say the same thing. It's a 5 out of 5 hardcore modern day masterpiece. What's really impressive with Park Chan-wook's directing, though, he does a great job of directing these characters and the story in a way to where there are constant plot twists to where you don't see them coming, but when they happen, it's like, okay, that makes sense. And you're on this journey with these characters. And so when these twists and turns happen, you're like, oh, you experience with what they're going through, like the surprise, the shock. But it's also a beautifully shot film. I mean, the cinematography is great, the costume design, the makeup. It's a beautifully mounted film, but also you really do care about these characters and everything that they're going through. And I also think that Park Chan-wook is known for his films that are very dark, very bleak. And don't get me wrong, this film is both of those things. But it also does have a surprisingly quote-unquote happy ending, which I wasn't expecting when I first saw it, but more than happy for it because I do think that it is earned. And I do think that The Handmaiden is a great film. But similar to The Wailing, it is a foreign film. So if you can't appreciate films in terms of having subtitles, I don't know what to tell you. But I would highly recommend it nonetheless because don't watch it dubbed, watch it subbed. It's a great film. And yeah, that's why it's my number 83. Next up, my number 82, we have Synecdoche, New York. So I know. Some of you might be surprised that this is even on the list because it wasn't even in my top 50 films of the 2000s list that I filmed like a couple years back. And I can explain. The reason why it wasn't was because I don't want to say I forgot about this film, but part of me is going to say that. Yeah, I did kind of forget about this film. So I saw this film in 2015. I liked it. I thought it was good, but it was kind of confusing, and I watched it late at night, so I wasn't able to fully appreciate it. But after I did my top 50 list, I think it was someone in the comment section was like, where's Synecdoche, New York? And I was like, oh, shoot, I forgot about that film. And so I was like, I'm going to rewatch it. And I rewatched it, and I liked it even more, so much so that I bought it on Blu-ray. And then I watched it on Blu-ray a couple months after that, and I loved it even more. And then I watched it again. I was like, yo, this is a great film. But what I absolutely love about this film isn't the fact that each viewing I grow more and more appreciation for it. It's the fact that every time I watch it, I get something different out of it because it's a film that the structure is intentionally trying to confuse you as a viewer. So as a viewer, you are looking at different aspects of the film each time, and that's something that I think is what I really, really appreciate in films. Coming back to it and getting something different instead of getting the same experience each time. This is a film that will hit viewers differently. There are going to be some viewers that are going to check out because of the way it's structured, because of the confusing nature of it, but just know that that is the point. You are intentionally trying to feel that way because the character also feels that way. And it's a fever dream of a film. I would say it's along the lines of like Mulholland Drive. I would say something along those lines. Maybe even more confusing though. Though Mulholland Drive, you can kind of figure out certain elements. But I would say Synecdoche, New York does something where the first like 45 minutes, you can kind of follow along really well. And then after that, it's not really possible. But again, I love it. I love the fact that it's like a Rorschach test, that each time you watch it, you get something new from it. I love Synecdoche, New York. I think it's a great film and one of Charlie Kaufman's best. And yeah, that is why it is my number, why it's my number 82. And next up, we have my number 81, which is Ex Machina. Ex Machina is a very well-crafted film. It's very well acted, well shot. Love the score. I also think that, my goodness, how this film is really able to get across information through the visuals is something I absolutely loved. Take, for instance, the opening scene and the ending scene. I think those are great examples of excellent visual storytelling of the 2010s. It's a film that has amazing visual effects. What's also impressive is the fact that it's a film that I think was like a $10 million budget film. So it really does showcase that you can have a film that's on the quote-unquote lower budget scale of things and still be able to use your money in a way that makes for seamless visual effects. I mean, holy cow, the visual effects, outstanding. Alicia Vikander is incredible. I do think she should have won Best Supporting Actress for this film, not The Danish Girl, but that's just me personally. I think Ex Machina, either way though, if you haven't seen this film and you like sci-fi films, cerebral films, highly recommend you watch it because it is a great film. It's also very entertaining, and yeah, so that's my number 81. Speaking of highly entertaining, we have my number 80, which is True Grit, 2010. So True Grit 2010, I think, is one of the best remakes of all time. But more importantly, this is a film that really changed me in terms of my journey out of becoming, like a film critic. I think that True Grit does such a great job of combining entertainment value, blockbuster sentimentality, and then also, of course, the Coen brothers' aesthetics. But also the Coen brothers' testimony of No Country for Old Men onwards having these themes and messages that are quite enriched of melancholy. And by that, I mean that these characters and their journey that they're going through, they witness a lot of violence. They witness a lot of things that change them. And with the ending in particular, you hear and you see all of those ramifications of the cost of vengeance. And I think that this is a great example of a neo-Western that understands that and doesn't glorify it. The original True Grit, I'm just going to be blunt and say this. When I saw it many times as a kid, I liked it, but I watched it right before seeing True Grit 2010 in theaters. So I think it was like December of 2010 when I saw the original again, and I haven't seen it since. Why? Because True Grit 2010, I think, just does such a great job of that story and handles it so much better. Better acting, better cinematography, better score, much better ending, and just an overall sense of themes and messages that I think are quite enriching. And also the humor is just really, really good. Much better delivery. It's just an overall better remake, and just a great story in general. I love the storytelling. I think it's quite effective. You really do get a sense of the time and place, and I think that it is just an excellent example of an adult film done right. I think that True Grit, if you've been sleeping on it, would highly recommend it. And also, wanted to say this, but True Grit's PG-13, and I will say that it is a very brutal PG-13. There are scenes of violence in it that you definitely will not forget. And I gotta say, props to the Coen brothers for sneaking it in a PG-13. True Grit, it is an excellent film, and I would highly recommend you watch it. I think it's personally a very underrated Coen brothers film, and I will defend that until the end. But yeah, that's my number 80. Next up, my number 79, we have The Insider. So The Insider, I really liked when I first saw it about almost a decade ago. And I've seen it a couple of times since, and each viewing I've just grown to really appreciate it more and more. And I think that the last viewing, which was a couple months ago, is when it really hit home how much I loved the film, because I watched it and I just got caught up with this lead character and everything that he was going through. Russell Crowe did a great job in the lead role. But what I also loved was that after the film, I said to myself, you know what? I mean, this was based on a true story and it actually happened, and that he was on 60 Minutes. Let me actually watch the real life interview. And I kid you not, watching the real life interview on 60 Minutes was just kind of eye-opening on how accurate this film is, because you watch that 60-minute interview and you're like, oh, wow, they literally are lifting dialogue from that interview into the film. And it works really well, and it adds a sense of authenticity, which I gotta say, this film does have. I feel like based on true story films, sometimes can be a slodge to get through and do feel quite paint by numbers, but The Insider feels anything but that. You feel the paranoia of these characters, you feel the dread, you feel the drama, and just the sense of just things breaking apart right in front of you of this character. It's a really effective character study. It's also got Michael Mann at his best. Again, it's a hot take, I know, but this is my favorite Michael Mann film. I think he did a great, great job with this film, and yeah, that is why it's my number 79. Next up, my number 78, we have Hereditary. What a film. What a film. This is still, to this day, my favorite Ari Aster film. I think he did such a great job directing this film, to where each viewing, I find myself picking up more and more details. You know a film is great when that occurs, in my opinion, at least. And I absolutely think that the family drama is really, really effective. Toni Collette gave us an Oscar-worthy performance. I think she was snubbed personally. Love the cinematography. That opening scene is just outstanding. A great, great representation on combining cinematography and editing. The ending itself is also incredible. I really think this film excels in terms of the pacing and when to, be fast-paced and when to slow down. Great, great character study. Just an overall very well-crafted film. I think it's a very horrifying film, but I will also say this. The selling point will be that, hey, it is a family drama film, and that the horror elements are there, and that I'm just going to say, if you don't like horror, I think you can still appreciate this film, because again, the family drama is just so, so good. And yeah, that's why it's my number 78. Next up, my number 77, we have The Fugitive. So I believe, could be wrong, but I believe that it was recently announced that this is getting a 4K release. And I gotta say, I'm very excited for that because the Blu-ray looks good, but I also know that on 4K with HDR, it's gonna excel. The Fugitive is a great action film. One of my favorites. I absolutely love that bus scene. I think it is a great usage of practical effects. But also, holy cow, can we talk about the pacing of this film? The pacing is just breakneck. I mean, you barely get a chance to breathe, but when you do, it makes sense, and it also is still effective in terms of the pacing because you care about this lead character, you care about what he's going through, and just the moral dilemmas with what he goes through throughout this film. I do think that the film also does a great job in terms of the setting. You again feel the living, breathing setting of with where he's at all times. Great performances, great score by James Newton Howard. Just an overall great action film, and yeah, that's why it's my number 77. Next up, my number 76. As of filming this video, this has already been confirmed that it's coming out in 4K, and I'm happy for it. My number 76 is The Exorcist. So The Exorcist, it's kind of funny saying this out loud now, but The Exorcist was a film that when I saw it, I saw the director's cut. And it was about nearly a decade ago, and I didn't really think the film was that scary, other than certain things like the spider walk backwards and some of the faces, the faces that crop up. But here's the thing: I didn't realize that those were director's cut additions. So when I wanted to revisit the film, and I was at the record store, and I was looking through, and I saw it was in theatrical cut, I was like, wait a minute, the theatrical cut sounds a lot better. So I made sure that, hey, this came with the director's cut and the original theatrical cut. And I think this is like the British version. But anyways, that's the only way to buy it. Like in the US, it only had the director's cut, but the 4K that's coming out is going to have both cuts. So I'm very happy about that because I think that the theatrical cut is a much better film than the director's cut. Not going to get into spoilers per se, but I will say that the director's cut has it where you see the house right away, and it's like, why are you showing the house? As opposed to the theatrical cut, it's in the middle of the desert, and you as a viewer are with these characters in their journey, so you're figuring out information at the same time that they are, and it makes for a devastating journey. The Exorcist is a great horror film, but similar to Hereditary, or I should say Hereditary is similar to The Exorcist, they know how to have family drama that you get caught up with, so that way when the horror elements occur, you are with them and you fear for them. And that, in my opinion, is strong storytelling. And The Exorcist is one of the best for a reason. I've grown to really appreciate The Exorcist, similar to Rosemary's Baby. Those are two films that when I saw back in 2015, I thought they were good, but I did not think that they were scary. But now, 8 years later, I find them not only to be scary, but I find them to be some of the best horror films ever made, and just films in general. So, again, I always tell people, what I love about films and TV shows is that over the course of time, your views can change. Not always, but they can change. And I will definitely say with The Exorcist, as you can see, my views have changed. I went from thinking it was just good to now loving it and think it's a great film. So yeah, The Exorcist is my number 76. But yeah, guys, that is my number 76 to 100, or I should say 100 to 76. Let me know your guys' top 100 films of all time, or top 10, top 25, top 50, whatever you guys feel like doing. I am very curious to hear you guys also in the comment section down below. And also, I might be having a poll for my top 100 to top 250, similar to like, what IMDb does, like top 250. So I'll be putting that poll down probably after this video drops, but stay tuned for that. And guys, as always, thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate you guys' support. Don't forget the subscription, notification bell, follow me down on Letterboxd, and I will catch you guys later.